The Indianapolis Colts may not have made the playoffs in 2024, but they have plenty of talent to solidify the future. So, which players can be considered cornerstones for potential success? Which talents have given the most confidence to the team? And who do you, the fans, want to see considered pillars of the franchise? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. I am Drake Wally, deputy editor of the site and co-host of the channel. And then, of course, I am joined by the one and only analyst on the site and fellow co-host of the podcast, Noah Gebert. Noah, this is a team that didn't exactly instill, the utmost confidence in fans, but there are still plenty of talented players, and we're going to consider some of these young guys that are on the team that maybe haven't been on the team more than about a couple of years or are just coming off of their first season with the squad that could potentially be cornerstones of the future. So how are you doing, buddy? How do you feel about, potential pillars of the franchise, guys like DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Zaire Franklin, Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor? They've already done this. Quentin Nelson. It might be time to discuss the next step up and the next guys that are behind him.
Yeah. Doing well. How you doing, Drake?
Oh, doing absolutely wonderful. It's almost Friday.
So I saw actually this comment pop in before we even started, just based on the title. And that was Patrick Rye, CFO of the show. I'll throwing up an unpopular opinion to start that there's no future cornerstones of a sustained, successful Colts team on the team at this moment. I think that maybe is a little. I mean, it's definitely on the pessimistic side, but I mean, with the results that they've seen in the past few years, you can't really argue too much with that. I mean, everybody that we're going to throw out is kind of a maybe not scenario. But I think we're tending to lean more on the optimistic side, and that's what these conversations in this show is going to be about. Is a little bit more about the optimistic side of what is the talent that you have already on the team that could potentially blossom into being that budding star and that cornerstone for the franchise.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, there's reasons why. I mean, each team has a cornerstone or two. I mean, each team has multiple guys that you can look at and you can say, hey, these are guys that you can build around. For the Indianapolis Colts, they still have a relatively young squad. And, there's nothing wrong with what Patrick said there. I mean, when you're 8-9 and then you're 9-8 the year before and you miss the playoffs both seasons, honestly, right now they're a very boring mediocre 17-17 through 2 years of Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson. That's not good. It's better to be terrible because then you get high draft picks, right? Because now you're middling and you've had the 15th overall selection. Now you're going to have the 14th overall selection. So it's very indicative of where the Colts are at. But let's get to the chat real quick. I mean, Truitt starting us off hot with a super chat. Thank you so much, my friend. That one's for you. And then Patrick Rice said, where are those guys at? Well, we started a little bit late, but Sean Conkright, thank you so much. Yes, we were a little bit late. David Burrows, greatest Colts show in the world. Cups up, Drake. Cups up to you, bud. Another sip for you. And then, of course, we have Stats Matt saying, if we are being honest, most of it depends on if AR figures it out. But if I wanted some of the current guys, Ryman Latu Downs and hopefully A.D. Mitchell. So that's what we're going to start with. We're actually just going to go ahead and dive right into this. So, me and Noah, the way that we're going to do this is we've got about 8 to 10 guys in mind here. Now, depending on how long we rant, we did save a couple as quote unquote backups, if you will, but we're just going to kind of snake this thing down just like we always do. But before we even get started, this is a team that is in a very weird spot because you have so much riding on this season. So much has to happen. You have to sign the right guys. You have to draft the right guys. You have to make the playoffs probably. It'd be a bonus if you can also win your division. And Richardson needs to take steps in the right direction. And honestly, Steichen took steps back. So he needs to take steps back in the right direction. So before we even get started here, Noah, what do you feel like the state of this franchise is? Where do you think the expectations are in 2025? And do you really have a lot of faith in this team to go and do all those things I just listed?
Yeah, so I think the expectations are going to be a little bit different depending on who you're asking, right? So you've got the fans who I think expectations couldn't be lower right now. They're not really expecting that much of them just because they've been getting the same old for the past few years. And then you go internally, and I think Jim Irsay expects something pretty serious, a pretty serious result, an AFC championship, a playoff berth at least, maybe a playoff win. Who knows what those expectations were that he laid down when he had that end of the year meeting, those exit interviews. at the end of the season with Chris Ballard and the coaching staff. I'd imagine they're pretty high and quite a bit higher than the average Colts fan. As far as myself, I think I'd probably fall somewhere in the middle. I don't necessarily think it's going to blow up in any sense. I'm not expecting a 5-win season next season. I hope maybe 7-9. I think would be terrible again because, like you said, the NFL does not reward mediocrity because you're not getting those high draft picks and you're not tasting any of that playoff success. So I think I'm not expecting them to win the division next year. I'm not expecting a big turnaround performance. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and I think that's going to end up in some changes down the line.
Yeah, and what you're hoping is that you don't have to blow it up, because if all of those things honestly don't fall into play, and really the biggest one is make the playoffs, I just cannot envision this team unless you somehow are in a ridiculously competitive division. You finish 10-7 and still don't make the playoffs. That's about the only scenario I can envision where the Colts don't make the playoffs and everyone stays intact. But we're going to go ahead and get started here. So this first one is one of mine. I feel like this guy had an absolute torrid season. He really proved a lot of us wrong, including myself. I was probably one of the biggest people that was just blown away at this guy's performance. And he's shown that if he continues this, he can absolutely be a cornerstone of this franchise as a big play threat. And that is one Alec Pierce. So Alec Pierce, I've got the numbers right here. He started his career 41 catches with Matt Ryan, Sam Ellinger, and Nick Foles in a ridiculous 2022 season. Then last year, you have mostly Gardner Minshew that doesn't fit his strengths. He has 32 catches for 514 receiving yards. Then you get two quarterbacks, Richardson and Flacco, who can both heave that pill deep. They can just absolutely uncork that ball, and they can put it at the high point. And the guy goes out there and has 69 targets, catches 37 of them, which – that's not exactly it's 53.6% catch efficiency, which, by the way, is a career high for Pierce. But he had 824 receiving yards. If he only has like 5 more catches, he's probably over 1,000 or close to it. And at 22.3 yards per clip, that is enough to really put a defense into a bind. Led the team in receiving touchdowns with 7, had 32 first downs on 37 catches. I personally feel like if he can just maybe round out that route tree a little bit, open up his game as a receiver more than just being a deep threat, he could be a really nasty weapon for this offense. What are your thoughts on Alec Pierce? What are your thoughts on his 2024 and him potentially being a cornerstone of this franchise, Noah?
Yeah, I think the thing that gives you some optimism there when you're talking about Alec Pierce is how those first 2 years his production was minimal. A lot of Colts fans were asking for him to be cut from the team. I think that's why there was so much hype with A.D. Mitchell and that draft pick in the second round this year. We had seen what we needed to see from Alec Pierce. We weren't expecting anything else, and we were ready to move on. And then he comes out this year, and he kind of has success in the same areas that he had success in the first 2 years, but at such a high level and so consistently that 7 touchdowns is a huge number, and most of those on big plays. So yeah, I mean you're throwing it up to him at the same kind of, or with the same kind of success on those deep balls. You were able to take advantage of it a lot more, and he was able to come down with the same amount of catches or the same percentage of catches that he has in the past 2 years. So I think that's a good sign that's just a skill he has in cement. Like, you're not going to have to expect any regression on that. You're not going to worry about, if we throw that same amount, maybe a couple don't go our way and the season looks different and you don't get those big plays on the offensive side of the ball. So yeah, I mean that's Alec Pierce. You hope that's last year was a sign that's consistent. You've at least at bare minimum got that deep threat, and then like you mentioned, kind of expanding that route tree, catching those short intermediate balls. I think becoming a more reliable target in that section of the game, I think, is key. And hopefully with Anthony Richardson next season, he is a guy who tends to target those short and intermediate routes a little bit more, which gives him a little bit more opportunities also to take advantage of those kind of routes.
Yeah, and Pierce also has, Reggie Wayne really went to bat for him, right?
Sure.
He was like, look, man, people were clamoring for this dude that, he's a bust. He might not be that second round guy. He's just a one-trick pony and this and that. You have to put this into context. Like, you had Gardner Minshew last year, who doesn't throw the ball deep, can't throw the ball deep, really. I was at the Raiders game live. He misses Pierce when he was wide open, and then they they had a video of him saying, "I'll get you the ball next time, AP."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it took every fiber of Gardner Minshew's being to get that football downfield. You don't have Richardson most of the season. And then the year before that, you have three rag-armed quarterbacks. Two out of those three couldn't throw the football anymore. They were done in the NFL. And the other one is a practice squad third stringer. So Pierce has not had any sort of consistency until this season with guys that fit his strengths. Now, I will say, right now, he's a guy that needs a quarterback who can throw the ball deep, but he also blocks his ass off. He's also the kind of teammate that is going to elevate this offense. And as soon as he catches one 30-yard ball, the defense has to think differently. And so I love what you said. Like, if Pierce isn't out there making a couple of those plays or a couple of extra plays, maybe the Colts finish 6-11. Maybe they're 5-12. I mean, this guy was out there just dunking on defensive backs. And so I like what you said there, but any final thoughts on Alec Pierce? I personally think that he might, if he hits his stride and hits his highest potential, you could be talking about a top 3 explosive weapon in the entire NFL.
Yeah, I think he showed that last year. I think when you're talking about cornerstones of the franchise also, you're kind of thinking beyond this rookie contract. I think he's got one more year left on his rookie contract this upcoming season. And to be a cornerstone guy for the future, you've got to expect to bring him back on a pretty high value deal, at least consistent with what other deep threats in the league have been getting in free agency. So you're going to see the Colts have to make a significant investment to keep him on the team. So the thing working against him there is that development of A.D. Mitchell. If that development of A.D. Mitchell goes according to plans how the Colts have wanted in the past, then I think that makes it a little bit more of a difficult discussion if you have going into next year where you have Alec Pierce's contract expiring.
Yeah, and you know what, NFL nerd, that'll be back up on Monday. I'm already tired of hearing you ask about it. I need to put that thing up right behind me. You're absolutely right. No, Patrick, I am not using it as a loincloth. I saved that jersey. I remember people said, oh, that jersey. I'm glad that I kept that jersey. So the next guy here is one of Noah's. I'm very excited about this guy. I athletic as hell, really started off his career so rough. Looked like a rookie when he was thrown into the fray, but it was during a season when nothing was going right. But then this guy starts to hit his stride. 2023 really hits his stride. 2024, he's a staple of this football team. Go ahead with yours next.
Yeah, that's going to be Bernhard Raimann, offensive tackle, who I think is on our list of guys that may be the most established, who Colts fans have been familiar. The Colts have been familiar with his game the past 2 years. He's been solid. He's been improving, and he's going to be a consistent force on the offensive line. I think, like I mentioned with that Alec Pierce discussion, when you're talking about future cornerstones, you're thinking about future contracts also, and whether or not the Colts are going to make that investment to keep them. I think this offseason is going to be a good turning point for the Colts, where you've got Braden Smith going into 1 year of his deal. We'll see if he's back next year, but regardless, if he's back next season, that most likely is his final season with the Colts. The Ryan Kelly situation in free agency, if they don't end up paying him, because you can only have so much invested on the offensive line, right? And at some point you have to save enough because you know that Bernhard Raimann's going to command a big deal and you want to lock him up because he's been consistent as your left tackle at such a premium position like left tackle, someone who's shown the consistency that he has. I think it'd be foolish to leave him off the list.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Bernhard Raimann, he's established himself as one of the better offensive tackles in the entire NFL. I mean, you look at his PFF grades. Last season, he played 856 snaps. Okay, the guy finished 8th overall in grade at 85.1, 10th in run block grade at 80.7, and as far as pass blocking, 14th with 82.0. Now, you look at the penalties, you look at the sacks allowed, some of that does leave a little more to be desired. He allowed 20 pressures, which is 87th. But man, I mean, coming out of Central Michigan, he had played tight end a little bit. So this is a guy that, transitioned over to tackle. He hadn't really played that much when he was inserted into the starting lineup. So I'm wildly impressed by Bernhard Raimann. I think that he can be even better than Anthony Costanzo. I really do. I think that he's got more athleticism than Anthony Costanzo. I think that he went to Boston College. But man, I'm really, really happy with this, with the way that Bernhard Raimann has progressed himself. And honestly, it's been a big part has been Tony Sperano Jr. But Yim, we got to get to your super chat here. Thanks for the content, boys. Is it still every Monday and Thursday? Yes, we took a break on Monday. We usually every year on this show, we take a break after the Super Bowl. We like to let people decompress a bit because that's the official end of the NFL season, and depression ensues because then you have to wait 7 freaking months before a meaningful game is played again for your team, especially when you don't make the playoffs.
It's been over.
Sad. And also random, but Noah low key looks like Derek from Step Brothers. Not an insult. Absolutely a legendary movie. And yes, that's probably Derek is probably the best looking guy in the entire movie. So congratulations, Noah.
Hey, I'll take it. I've actually heard that one, Adam Scott, before. So.
There you go, man. If you haven't seen Severance, everybody go watch it. But yeah, man, thank you so much, Yim. You are the man. And of course, have to give a little sip to you, my friend. But yeah, I do have to say it's one of those players that I just don't know if you're going to see fall off at this point. I would like to see less pressure because it is the quarterback's blind side. You don't have a lefty throwing the football. And the thing is, Bernard Ryman he still has not played that much football. Is the thing. He really hasn't. And this dude is already playing like one of the better, like a top 10 left tackle in the league. So at the end of the day, he's gotten better and better and better. Do you think that this could be a season where he gets even better and maybe, solidifies himself as a top 3, top 5 guy? Or do you think that he's pretty much, hey, I'd be happy if he's even just like fringe top 10?
Yeah, I would be for sure happy if he's just fringe top 10. I think there is the possibility that he ups his game a little bit more. Like you mentioned, hasn't been playing football his whole life and super young to the tackle position in general. So even though he was a little bit older as a rookie coming out, he's still got a long way had a long way when he came out to develop. So we don't know if he's hit his potential yet. If he has, still think you feel really good about that being your guy on the bookend on the left side for years to come. Just as a cornerstone discussion, you're wondering what kind of the regime looks like if this is the end of this is the last season for Bernard and Shane Steichen, or for Ballard and Shane Steichen. Regardless, I think Bernard Ryman's somebody that any new regime would want to hold on to if they ended up coming in.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you have to have a blindside protector. You just do, and you can't have somebody who's wishy-washy. I know at one point they had, if I'm not mistaken, they had just constant pressures coming off the back end there. Mm-hmm. They finally solidified it with Bernard Ryman. So be happy, Colts fans, because there's nothing worse than seeing your quarterback sit back there comfortable, sees nothing behind him, and boom, and you see the head go back and the arms fly and the football goes, right out there for a fumble. So I'm very happy with what we've seen from Bernard Ryman. But this next guy is a player who really had more thrown on his plate than I think anybody on the Colts coaching staff wanted. Had a lot of pressure being the high level pick that he was, playing as well as he did in college. And that's edge rusher Laiatu Latu. And, one thing about Latu that really stands out is his hustle. Another that stands out is his work ethic. And you've seen it from his positional coach, his personal coach. I think it's Coach Ed, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And then you've seen it from his position coach, Charlie Partridge, who I honestly thought might be dealt away when they got rid of Gus Bradley. But I think that they want to see what they have with Partridge. But Latu, man, he really found his rhythm at the end of the season. Of course, his stats aren't going to blow anyone away per se. Let me see here. Yeah, so played in 17 games, technically started only 1, but he had he had a fumble recovery, 32 tackles, 5 tackles for loss. I will say 12 quarterback hits is pretty impressive, given 17 games, not even a full starting sample. A pass defended, 4.0 sacks. Now, the thing that really stands out is he was one of the top guys. By the way, guys, Dio Dangbo led the Colts in QB pressures. Okay, so Laiatu Latu was not far behind with 38. That's not otherworldly, but given that he was a rookie on a team that was getting pressure when they had Nate Ollie as their positional coach in 2023, all of a sudden those pressures drop off like a bad habit. Leatu Latu was one of the most consistent guys at getting pressure on the quarterback, and he also ranked third in forced fumbles per PFF in his position. So this was a guy that was able to get to the football. He was able to get to the quarterback. He was able to make plays. He had 375 pass rushing snaps, 235 run defense snaps. The guy played over 600 snaps total. I'm impressed. I like Leatu Latu. I think that his sky is honestly very, very high. I think his sky, like his ceiling of potential is high enough that you can get a guy that I think when he hits, if he hits a stride, you might be looking at maybe under 10 sacks per season. Maybe he can hit that 10 sack season. I think that he could become a cornerstone. Probably has a higher ceiling than Kwity Paye, who's going to be that guy that's going to get you about 8.5, 8 sacks a season. What are your thoughts on Leatu Latu's rookie year? I think he could probably use Samson Ebukam being healthy again. But look, man, if Samson Ebukam is healthy, even though he led the team in sacks in 2023, I think this is the guy that they're looking at as the next leader on the edge.
Yeah, and I think the kind of thing that you had to deal with here is kind of resetting your expectations.
Yes.
When he came in as a rookie, I think that the expectations that the Colts had internally were quite a bit different than what Colts fans had. There was a lot of discussion about him coming in right away being a double-digit sack guy, which seemed at the time like that wasn't outlandish. He was coming in, everybody was talking about how refined his technique was and how many pass rush moves he had in his arsenal. He's not like the typical athlete that Chris Ballard would go for in terms of just pure explosiveness and power. He was more like that refined type who's gonna win with his hustle, right? Like you mentioned, and his technique and his work ethic and everything like that. Still a great athlete. I'm not trying to downplay that, but as far as like the kind of guys that Chris Ballard takes, he wasn't this outlier like a lot of the guys that Chris Ballard tends to favor. So you kind of thought those expectations were like he's ready to play immediately. He's ready to make a huge impact immediately. That double-digit sack number got thrown out a ton. But when you just take a step back and you forget all of those expectations, another thing, I think he was the first player off the board in the draft, which I think set expectations a little bit high also. Just understanding this is a rookie, and it wasn't a top 10 pick. He was the first defensive player off the board, but he was picked number 15. He was picked number 15 for a reason. He didn't go in the top 3, right? Because there was still some room to grow, and maybe that, who knows what that ceiling is with him. If he stays healthy, I think that was a big thing. He didn't start right away. He didn't start this season. He got one start, but he was able to play a fair amount of snaps, more than I think the Colts wanted to in all 17 games that they had, which I think was key when you were worried about maybe that medical history that was such a big red flag during the draft. But yeah, I think he proved he could stay healthy. Like that wasn't a huge impact, or it wasn't any impact at all, at least from anything that came out publicly. Was the neck's a non-issue. So from there, you're going off of, okay, then we know he has the potential to get a whole bunch of sacks and improve his pass rushing repertoire even more. Just a super refined guy. So I'm excited to see him going into next season, maybe taking that next step. I think ideally you would still want to use him as a situational pass rusher and throw him into third downs. I don't think while he has the body for it, he's big enough, 6'5", 265, to be a run defender and a guy that can set the edge. I think ordinarily you would like to have him rushing the passer more often than not, and not really relying on the run defense part of his game. And I think if you can get him in that role and just keep him fresh on third downs, then I think his pressure rate's going to go even higher. And when that pressure rate goes higher, I think that sack total of 4 is just by default going to go up.
Yeah, and I mean, he was probably the most, based off of the tape, based off of the prospect, and during the draft, he was probably the most day one ready pass rusher in the draft, man. And it's a good thing he went and got a second opinion on his medicals, because when he was at Washington, they said his career's over, and he went and got the medicals reevaluated and realized, hey, no, I can still play. Leatu Latu, people, at the end of the day, he's very cerebral. He has ridiculous bend, which he is going to undercut the arms of these long rangy offensive tackles. Guys like Bernard Ryman would have fits with this guy because he's a little bit more compact. He's going to go underneath those blocks. He also has incredible like versatility as far as his pass rushing moves. He can also line up inside. And I know Noah in one episode said that, it'd be really great if you would see him maybe get lined up, because he likes to stand. He doesn't usually put that hand down. He's usually standing. And so that's a pass rusher. That's a pure unadulterated pass rusher. Kwity Paye is more of your post. You're going to stick him right in there, and he's going to move that tackle and stop that outside or inside run. Whereas Leatu Latu is just more of a pure unadulterated pass rusher who's going to get to the quarterback. So, yeah, I mean, you want to see Latu be more of a every down player, but that might not be who he is, ladies and gentlemen. He might just be a guy who is more of your pass situation type guy. So I do think that you're looking at the height of Latu, 8, 9, 10 sacks. And guess what? Not everybody can be 17 and a half like Trey Hendrickson. Okay. Not everybody can be Micah Parsons or Miles freaking Garrett, who, by the way, destroys entire offensive lines by himself. Leatu Latu has a ceiling that is just fine. And it's perfect for what this team needs. I think that even Lou Anarumo, he was asked about the defense, and he said, I really like Latu. He wasn't even asked about Latu, and he brought him up. He said, I loved him out of the draft. So you got a defensive coordinator that really knows what a defensive end should look like. I mean, hello, Trey Hendrickson. This guy is in the perfect situation, I think, right now. So, but we'll go ahead and move on here. So I love this one from Noah. This is a guy that kind of similar to Alec Pierce, maybe even more so, man. People were clamoring for this dude. They were saying he's a bust. He wasn't worth the trade up. He's athletic, but he's not really that good. I can't wait to talk a little bit about this guy. Hell of a defensive player, had himself truly a breakout season, really surfaced as one of the hustlers in the NFL at his position. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, this is going to be Nick Cross, who plays a position that's not as premium as some of these other ones that we've mentioned, obviously. But in Anarumo's defense, I think the defensive backs are gonna play a little bit of a bigger role. A little bit more pressure is going to be put on them than there was in Gus Bradley's scheme. But like you mentioned, that stark contrast from where he was in training camp, or more specifically towards the end of training camp, as that like preseason went on and that offseason program, like going into the offseason, the expectations for Nick Cross were so high. He can play both safety spots. He can play in the slot. He can be this guy that's this versatile chess piece on the back end. And then you go to training camp and you're like, oh, he's fighting for a job with Ronnie Harrison, who was a waiver wire pickup from the season before, who was turned back to safety. And you're starting to worry, okay, if Nick Cross can't hold down a starting safety job and he's battling out with former 7th round pick Rodney Thomas and Ronnie Harrison, then you're a little bit worried about what that is. Wasn't getting those snaps in the slot. So that kind of changed. I think it helped the Colts kind of reset their expectations also on him. And maybe not a guy that you're going to move around so much on the back end, but when you stuck him in that spot at strong safety and you watched him go throughout the whole season, he was a solid player, and he's still a really young player at that position. And I don't know that a safety's ever going to be like a strong safety, a box safety in Nick Cross's case is ever going to be that premium of a position. But in terms of upside that you have on that defense, I think he's in the upper tier when you're considering the next 5 years of the Colts defense, somebody who can consistently be around to make plays and continue to grow and flourish in a role. Hopefully what we see with Lou Anarumo coming in as defensive coordinator this year is one, sticking to the position that he knows he can excel at and get that full training camp and this offseason working out in that one spot and not flexing around and trying different areas. Because I think it seemed like it tended to be the mental part of the game that was too much for him early on in his career. And even during this training camp this past season, the communication, knowing the play calls and things like that, and what was essentially a pretty simple scheme on Gus Bradley's end. Had you worried a little bit. So getting this full season and understanding what his limitations are and what his strengths are after you've had him in the building for this long, I think is going to be key for him. But yeah, I think he's somebody that can grow and potentially get that second contract with the Colts, and then you can kind of always rely on that on the back end of your defense.
Yeah, and look, Nick Cross's story is actually pretty incredible because you move up in the draft to get this guy. I'm looking at his stats right now: 96th overall, third rounder out of Maryland. Just an absolutely jacked human being, by the way. I remember seeing him during some of the media days there at the facility. in Westfield. And I mean, he's only 6 feet tall, but my God, is he huge. And you're kind of looking at this guy like, why can't you be better? Right. Fans were like, why can't you be better? Starts off his career not ready. They thought that he was going to be ready to start, not ready at all. I believe he was 20 years old as a rookie, which is ridiculous. Couldn't even drink legally, and I'm drinking on this show. So you're kind of looking at that like, wow, that's incredible. 17 tackles. Okay, he gets benched. You're looking at Rodney Thomas II as your free safety. You're looking at Rodney McLeod as your strong safety. Then next season, he's handcuffed incredibly close to Gus Bradley. Doesn't really play a lot of snaps. He only had 39 tackles. Then the wheels start turning. This guy had 146 tackles, 6 tackles for loss. He had a sack. He had a forced fumble. He had 5 passes defended. He had 3 interceptions. This dude was flying all over the field. In fact, per Pro Football Focus, I have to rattle these off. Second amongst all these are among safeties, by the way, in the NFL. Second in solo tackles with 112, 24th in assisted tackles with 29. He had 38 stops, which is 4th, and he had 3 interceptions, which was 12th. He had the second most run defense snaps and the second most total snaps. Okay, I mean, this guy went from being a guy that you're looking at like he might not be a dude that's going to work out to a guy that you're like, holy cow, he could be, as we're saying here, a cornerstone of this franchise for years to come. Julian Blackmon, people are looking at him like, now people aren't like, who's going to compliment Julian Blackmon now? Mm-hmm. People are saying, who's going to compliment Nick Cross? Like, that's what people are saying now. I know that he could get better in coverage. Obviously, he's not the greatest in coverage, but he's a hell of a run defender. He plays he's got the size of a smaller linebacker. Him and Jalen Carlisle are not that much different in their size, people. And it's mostly because Jalen Carlisle used to be a safety. But I love the fact that he brought up Nick Cross here. I think I hope that Cross doesn't have to tackle 146 times because that's kind of embarrassing. That means that your team is not doing a very good job tackling and they're letting runners get through that first and second level. But at the end of the day, man, I mean, do you think that Nick Cross has established himself as the safety in Indianapolis? Because look, guys, if Julian Blackmon doesn't get a contract and he has to sign with the Colts, it's probably going to be for a rotational role, and they're going to either draft or sign a free safety to join Nick Cross to continue that development. Do you think that he's got another great year ahead? Because I sure as hell do.
Yeah, I think odds are he's going to have another good season. I think Cornerstone might be a little bit strong. I know we're talking about potential guys just because of the position he plays, and that seems like that position is so interchangeable, safety in general. And then you're talking about, okay, he's more of a box safety and less of that rangy free safety that I think Lou Anarumo's defense is a little bit more predicated on. So maybe in terms of just value going forward that way, you're not really expecting so much. But yeah, I think he had to be brought up just because of the way that he turned around expectations for himself this past season. Like you were talking about who's going to pair up with Julian Blackmon was all the buzz this offseason to be that other safety, and now it's completely the opposite. So I think, he did a great job there of switching up kind of what people were thinking about him.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, he was so unbelievably young. You have to give a guy like him time. That's really at the end of the day, you got to give him time. So young, you got to adjust. You go from funny cars and like dirt tracks to NASCAR and IndyCar. Like it's so much. The jump from college, even OSU, Notre Dame levels of college talent to the freaking NFL. You're talking about grown ass men who make millions of dollars to supply food for their families. Okay, this is a lot different, and the fact that he made that big jump is awesome. In fact, I want to highlight this comment from the one and only, the legend, the longtime supporter, Rich Wheeler. At times, Cross played like a younger brother of Bob Sanders last year. Just need a Bethea type alongside him. Oh my God, what a time to be alive when you had that combo. That's a big name to compare somebody to, but I will say Nick Cross has the body type for that. I don't think anybody can hit like Bob Sanders anymore. I think you'll get penalized. Bob Sanders would owe millions of dollars a year if he played still. So, but Rich, you're not wrong. I mean, hey, if he can turn into even a 3/4 of that, Colts fans will be ecstatic. So this next guy, kind of already brought him up, 5th round pick, used to play safety, falls into the linebacker position, didn't really play all the snaps that he probably wanted to due to injury,
Mhm.
but played enough that I feel like this guy is the most talented in the position room, and that's Jalen Carlies. Jalen Carlies, man, what is there not to say about this guy? He can tackle, he can intercept the football, he can cover, he can adjust. He's played multiple positions if you needed him to in a set. Basically, because we're already Noah already had to cut a couple of these guys out because we're talking so much here. This is a guy that Lou Anarumo is going to salivate over. You can do so much with this guy. 83.1 coverage grade, by the way, fourth among linebackers. Oh, that's so fantastic to see. Played his ass off, and he had a sack, he had an interception, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. You're looking at this dude, and honestly, he's far better at coverage than Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed. He might not be the great run defender, probably never will be because of his body type. What are your thoughts on Jalen Carlies? I think that if he can put on a little bit of weight and somehow not lose that coverage ability, I think you're looking at the best linebacker potentially for the Colts in the future. That's just my hunch.
Yeah. So first off, I'll just start just strictly based on like the skill set that they have. And you're talking about this modern NFL where you want a linebacker that can cover, and it's been a long time since the Colts have had that kind of guy. EJ Speed's not that guy. Zaire Franklin's not that guy. You go back even to Shaq Leonard. He was great in coverage. He was just opportunistic when the ball came his way, and that the turnovers really made the difference. But as far as just down to down coverage, you wouldn't like to rely on him on the back end. So Jalen Carlies is really one of the first guys that comes in with that skill set at the linebacker position, and kind of you hope that he can be the guy that transitions you into more of a modern type of defense, where you have this guy who can match up with running backs coming out of the backfield. He can match up with tight ends, who are excelling in the receiving game, and not just your inline tight ends who aren't as much of a threat. And in Anarumo's defense, they're going to play quite a bit more man than they have in the past. So you want that guy on the field who you feel confident going into those matchups with. And Carlies is really only that guy. Just aside from skill set, you're also talking about the people on the roster and the room and the opportunities that he has. Zaire Franklin, you have an out in his contract after next year, where if you want to move on, it would make a lot of sense financially to do it next season. It would not this season, obviously. So he's probably going to be here this season. But Jalen Carlies, I think if he can prove himself to be that guy and be more of an every down guy and stay healthy and kind of solidify himself in that light, then he has a huge opportunity going into the next season after this season ends. And then you're really talking 5 years in the future, whatever. If he's that modern type of linebacker and you've got money freed up at that position, then he has all the opportunity in the world.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, he reminds me so much of Cato June that it's crazy. I mean, you're talking about a linebacker, and actually, Carlies didn't even have an interception last season. I think he had a pass defended, but he struggled with injuries, and the guy still showed so much prowess as a coverage linebacker. But like you said, if you can even get a little bit more run defense out of him, I mean, you got an all-around guy. And today's linebackers aren't these giant Jack Lamberts where the shoulder pads are sticking all the way out and they're big, heavy hitters. No, you need nimble guys who can cover your modern-day NFL tight ends that get moved around like a Brock Bowers, or the guys that are in line like George Kittle that can muscle you out of the way. But you also need a guy who can still penetrate, get through those blockers, and stop the run. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that Jalen Carlies is going to need to improve on. But at the end of the day, man, I love the fact the Colts picked him. The Colts have got a knack. Chris Ballard, say what you want about him. He's got a knack for linebackers, and he almost always seems to hit on him. And it, like in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, it just seems. I mean, Zaire Franklin's a 7th round pick, ladies and gentlemen. So it just seems like that's where Ballard finds all this talent. But this next one, I mean, if you know Noah Gebert, this is no surprise. But I will say that this is a guy that has really impressed me. I think that everybody was we got adults watching this show. They were wetting their pants when everybody got Juju Brents. I mean, look, Juju Brents has still got a high ceiling if he can stay healthy. But this is the guy of the future right now. Noah, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is the guy who came in and immediately made an impact in ways that you weren't expecting out of a
Yeah.
seventh round pick. Drafted super young. This is Jalen Jones. I feel like I should mention that before I go too deep on what we're doing here. But yeah, drafted super young. He was 20 years old when he got picked up as a seventh round pick, and then came in and established himself to be that guy opposite of Juju Brents, who you thought it was going to be. And then Juju Brents went down. And you had him and Dallas Flowers out there. I mean, no matter what's happened with injuries and whatnot going on in the back end of the defense, Jalen Jones has been the guy, at least on one of the outside corner spots, which has been awesome to see, and awesome to see him surpass expectations. I mean, just that pedigree of being a seventh round pick. You love to see somebody come in, and we talked about this with a couple of guys. Talked about the positional value, where maybe it's not so big for a box safety like Nick Cross, but you're talking about an outside corner. That's huge, right? In the passing NFL, that's going to be a big deal no matter what. So, I mean, when we mentioned Bernard Ryman, if another regime ends up coming in after this season, if things don't go as planned, then I think a valuable outside corner is something that any regime would be happy to have. And then this year, Lou Anarumo coming in, playing more man coverage. You hope it works like it has been. Jalen Jones hasn't been tested that much, to be honest, because the cover 3 is a little bit generous. He has that deep responsibility, and he doesn't have that burning speed. But so he could kind of play back in that soft zone that the Colts always did, and Colts fans have always hated seeing him play in that soft zone. But then on those in-breaking routes, he was always aggressive, right? Where he was able to jump those slants and those shallow ins where it looks like the receiver has a step almost every time, and then he reaches out with those long arms because he's 6'2", dives and breaks up the pass. I mean, you love seeing that aggression, that confidence to be able to jump those routes, and that confidence when he's in those positions where it looks like the receiver has an advantage, where he keeps his head and has those ball skills to jump out and make the play. You hope that this scheme, switching it up a little bit and changing the responsibilities he has on certain plays, you hope, one, he can keep up with that mentally, which doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue because as a 20-year-old rookie, just turned 21, starting NFL games, he was able to do that. And then another thing, you hope that frees him up to be a little bit more aggressive when he's got one man, he's watching that one man the whole time keying, and doesn't have to keep his head on a swivel so much in zone to watch out for anybody else that may be coming into that deep third that he usually covers. So he's locked on with one guy. I think that press, if he's getting up in more press opportunities at the line of scrimmage, that's going to go his way because he's a strong physical corner with long arms. I just think there's a lot of opportunities here for Jalen Jones to take what has been a really solid NFL career to this point, especially considering where he was drafted, and really flip it on its head and show that he can be a solid NFL corner in any scheme, and really an outside corner of that caliber, if he can turn into that, is something that any team would be envious over.
Yeah, and the guy started 10 games last year. He played all 17. He had 5 passes defended, 44 tackles. Okay. But when you talk about his draft stock, when you talk about what was expected of him, people were talking about Darius Rush. Mm-hmm. That's what people were talking about. The reason Darius Rush isn't on the team is because of that man, Jalen Jones. Okay, the Colts triple dipped at cornerback that draft, anticipating Jalen Jones. They probably anticipated Jones wasn't going to make the roster when they
did not want to play Jalen Jones.
Exactly. And so, yeah, Rush might have gotten hurt, but man, if they felt like Jones wasn't the guy, they would have waited this out. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy that goes out there, has 2 interceptions, both in the same game, by the way, 12 passes defended, 100 tackles, 3 for loss. I mean, he stuck his nose in run defense. This is a guy that is only let me see here. When is his birth? 22 years old. Yeah. He's 22 years old. He's got so much ahead of him. And right now, you're talking about Sam Womack, Kenny Moore II, and Jalen Jones. That's who you're talking about. You're talking about Juju Brents as the cornerback 4 right now. And yes, is he possibly a better cornerback than Jalen Jones? Sure. He also should be. But the thing is, Jalen Jones might be the guy. And he's great in press coverage. He's a strong defender. And the thing is, last year, people were talking about, in 2023, I remember going to the Raiders game, and he kind of got cooked by Davante Adams. Well, that's Davante Adams, man. And he was a rookie. Jalen Jones is a dog. He's a dog. I think he's only going to improve. I think now with Lou Anarumo, that's going to bring out the best in him. I can see a career year coming from Jalen Jones and or just him staying with the Indianapolis Colts. I think at this point, man, unless he has an absolutely awful season and falls off the wayside in his junior NFL campaign, there's no way in hell you can envision him not staying with the Colts for years to come. So at the end of the day, what are your expectations? I do got to ask this because I know that you've really been clamoring for this dude to be respected more. And hey, guess what? You're right, number one. And number two, this guy's proven it on the field. What are your expectations for Jalen Jones after a pretty damn good season?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say about Jalen Jones. Of all the Colts on the roster, I've obviously watched him the most, just because one personal interest, and then a couple articles that went up on the site as well. So I mean, there's a lot. I think it's a long NFL offseason, right? Where we're going to have a lot of doldrums going into the summer. I think we should just do
Sure.
a Jalen Jones episode one time, right? Where we could just dive in and nerd out all Jalen Jones on one episode, and we'll save it from that because we're already about 46 minutes in and got a couple more key guys to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, hey, at the end of the day, he's played fantastic. So we'll go ahead and get to this next guy. Not really a surprise, these last two, and we saved them for last just for that reason. This next one, I'm just going to jump right into it. Josh Downs, second receiver here. We were going to consider talking about A.D. Mitchell, but I mean, outside of getting open, A.D. Mitchell can't catch anything at this point. So he's got a lot of room to grow as a young receiver. But Josh Downs was not supposed to be a Ballard guy. He was not supposed to be that archetype. He's only like 5'9". Reggie Wayne clamors for this guy, just pounds the table for him, says he's the best receiver in the draft. Now he's arguably one of the best slot receivers in football. He's got yak ability, reception. He's got sticky hands, phenomenal route running, great separation. His size doesn't really seem to matter in coverage. I mean, you're talking about a guy that through 2 seasons has 140 catches on 205 targets for a clip of 68.3%. for 7 touchdowns and 1,574 receiving yards. Josh Downs became arguably the number one receiver on this team. Pittman was dealing with some really bad back issues. What are your thoughts on Josh Downs? I honest to God, I think that he has got wide receiver one written all over him. If Pittman does get back to square one and 100%, he's probably going to take that crown. But, man, I just don't think we're far off from talking about Josh Downs having like 110 catches and like 7 touchdowns and just having a stupid breakout year for a slot guy.
Yeah, you stole my thunder a little bit right there, but then you backed off, so I'm going to push it a little bit further. I think even if Michael Pittman's back to what he was, Josh Downs is still wide receiver one on this team. I think he's that good. And that's not a knock on Michael Pittman. I just think Josh Downs is that good, and I think you can utilize him a little bit more than you did. I know he's that quick win guy and can be a short, intermediate kind of guy over the middle and get open on these quick. Yeah, when you've got man coverage on third down, you're finding Josh Downs and you're scheming up a route where he can get open fast and use his elusiveness. And that's pretty awesome, right? And you need Anthony Richardson to be able to hit those a little bit more consistently to take advantage of those. But everyone knows that's the good part of his game. I want to talk about something that's not as, I mean, you see it obviously in the game, but you don't really consider it when you're thinking about him. It's just the way that he's able to improvise after a play starts to break down. You hope Anthony Richardson can be a guy who can make more plays after he's scrambling around back there, avoiding sacks like he does, instead of scrambling for 2 yards and avoiding a sack or scrambling and throwing it away miraculously after throwing all these guys off of him. Let's find Josh Downs because he's getting open on those plays. You keep your eyes downfield because, I mean, he's, what was it, just deep 20-plus yards last season, had a 99.1 receiving grade on PFF. When you chuck it up to him, he's able to find those soft spots in the zone. I remember that Gardner Minshew pass, scrambling in the end zone, breaking some tackles, and then chucking it up. And Anthony or Josh Downs diving for it, a fingertip grab along the sideline. I mean, he's that guy, right? So you've got his consistent quick win ability in the short and intermediate game, and then you've got just a playmaker back there who, if something breaks down, you look for number one across the field. And you throw it up to him because, I mean, he's not going to win those jump balls like Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman have that ability to, but he's going to find those spots in the defense and take advantage of that and then make acrobatic catches when it needs to be.
Yeah, and look, Josh Downs, in his first season, right, he had a couple of big plays. He had a couple of plays that were really amazing. He only had a few touchdown receptions. but the guy made it work. Just has so many. This Colts receiving core guys between Pittman, Pierce, and Downs, so talented. Downs has already played with three freaking quarterbacks. Three. Okay, you got a guy that throws it short. You got a guy that just heaves it deep. Then you got a guy like Richardson who can just do so much and is inaccurate up to this point in his career. Downs doesn't care. Downs' efficiency transcends quarterbacks. Like, this guy is just out there making plays. And like Noah said, when plays break down, Josh Downs is open. He's open. He finds the soft spot. He's intelligent. He's a cerebral receiver who can run every route on the route tree. And he also has breakaway potential. He's got elusiveness. He's got speed that's overlooked. Josh Downs he's just a complete package. But this last guy is definitely one that nobody should be surprised by. This is Noah's last one. And I'm actually going to let Noah introduce him because, look, everything going forward from this point on is hinging on this man's success. So please go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, this is someone you just have to talk about when you're talking about potential Colts cornerstones. This is the cornerstones, the most important position in sports, and that's Anthony Richardson. And maybe you're looking at him like a lottery ticket that has a few numbers scratched off already and you haven't hit yet. You're a little bit worried about
Good analogy.
You're a little bit worried about maybe going forward. It's not going to work out for you, but man, you still got a few more to scratch off. You could be a big winner, and you still can be with Anthony Richardson. I think he has a lot to prove, not just on the field, off the field. I think the Colts, after the benching, he seemed to make some strides in terms of his work ethic and the work that he was putting in beyond the expectations of a standard player. And then, yeah, just staying healthy, right? Chris Ballard, despite all of the inaccuracy, inconsistency, and everything that was going on with his play during the season, when Chris Ballard was talking about him in the closing press conference at the end of the year, the number one thing that he said he was worried about is that Anthony Richardson has not proven that he can play 17 games. And I know that quote's been taken out of context for sure lately. I've been seeing that pop up on Twitter a bunch when that was said over a month ago, right? So maybe that's being blown up a little bit out of proportion in terms of what he said. But I mean, in context, he was just being straight up honest. Like, he hasn't proven 17 games that he can stay healthy, and that's super true. So it's all going to hinge on him, man. And the Anthony Richardson conversation is going to go on until the Colts move on from him or sign him to a big extension. Like, it's gonna keep going on. Chris Ballard wants to bring in competition for him, but ultimately, any competition that you're going to be able to bring in, unless you're drafting somebody in the first round, you're still hoping Anthony Richardson is the guy that works out.
Yeah, and one of the things is that there's not many quarterbacks like him. That's one of the biggest things. You've got this guy who I remember. I can't remember if it was Colts Film Room. Who, by the way, if you haven't checked him out on Twitter, please go check out Colts Film Room. He makes just absolute. I think it was against the Jets. He's falling sideways, getting tackled sideways. He's in midair and throws a football. Completes the pass. Like, what the hell? No, you should have been down. Most quarterbacks would be down. Then he's running free, wide open to his weak side, and throws a pass wide open. Kylan Grant's right over his head. Same game. Okay, that is the problem with Richardson, is you can't get consistency. You can't get the gimmies. And who did we last say that with? Carson Wentz. You had this guy who rolled to his weak side against the Cardinals, throws a freaking off-body throw to Desmond Patton in the end zone. Nobody should be able to make that throw. And then he looks dead at her linebacker and throws a pick. Like,
you used the wrong hand.
Exactly. It's my apologies. My apologies. That's Carson Wentz, and that's also right now, right in this moment, that's Anthony Richardson. I mean, you're talking about a pretty solid rookie year, given only 4 games, and then you have 8 touchdown passes, you have 12 interceptions, you have 9 fumbles, just an absolutely lackluster season. Now, yes, Steichen didn't put him in exactly the best positions to win, but Richardson has to improve. Richardson's a smart dude. No more tapping out, after a play when you're tired. No more, getting benched for this guy. He can't get benched again, or you're probably looking at this thing being over. Okay? No more under 50% completion percentage. Look, bud, you don't want to be Tim freaking Tebow and be a dude who's remembered for one good play, like when he hit that 65-yarder to Pierce, and everything else is BS. Richardson's, Colts', Steichen's, and Ballard's future all hinges on this kid succeeding. Okay. And this season is so paramount. So that's the biggest one. And he can't look, if he connects everything this season, he's working with Chris Hess, he's working with his quarterback coach, Will Hewlett. If it doesn't work out this season, that's probably it. Okay. Because he's done everything possible at this point to improve. It's such a wild card, but we'll have to see. But anyway, those are all the guys. I think that it's very safe to say the biggest one here is Anthony Richardson, but we do got to get to our news and rumors. We've got a couple things here.
Can I stop
the
you,
first
Drake?
One, oh yeah,
I want to
please.
put you on the spot just for the viewing audience here. Because I think I said this and it was a little bit pessimistic, but I want to get a number from you. Percentage chance that Anthony Richardson is the franchise quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts.
50.
50. You're still at a solid 50?
Yeah.
I want to hear what the chat thinks too. I definitely seen Twitter. I think Twitter is a little bit. I think the audience is
it's starting to get more and more divided. It's getting more divided.
I kind of want to see where we're at. Patrick's maybe a little bit closer to where I'm at.
Very specific, a 37.4.
It's very specific. Yeah, but I want to see what other people think for sure. Yeah, we should get into the news and rumors, but definitely throw those percentage chances in the chat. That one's pretty rough.
Oh, 0. Yeah, so Spooks Hill Joe, we won't put up the comments because they're a little bit negative, but Spooks Hill, I hear what you're saying. A lot of people have said this about Richardson is that he doesn't have the processing up here. Like the game moves too fast for him, doesn't have enough experience. He played 13 games in college. He's only got 15 in the NFL now. You're talking about 28 total. I mean, we'll have to see. But, yeah, go ahead and throw those in the chat. But so the first one is the Bengals linebacker Jermaine Pratt requests a trade. Should the Colts inquire? I personally think that they should because you're tying a guy who Lou Anarumo coached. I mean, his entire career was with Lou Anarumo up to this point, right? Like, I think this is a guy that isn't going to cost much. It's just not. Number one, this Bengals defense kind of sucked outside of Trey Hendrickson and Mike Hilton. This is a guy that I think could provide a spark. You might not be looking at drafting a linebacker if you trade for him.
Yeah, I think the legend Andrew Moore on Twitter said it himself. I was following this, and I don't think you could say it any better. Where this trade makes sense, but he is a big cut candidate for the Bengals. If the Colts have any chance of getting him in a trade, there may be one of those top teams that would be the target. If he gets cut, the expectation that the Colts land him goes way up, right? And I think it was like a $5 million cap hit. It wouldn't be crazy. It's not a lot, but him being the green dot. Him being the guy who gets all the calls on Lou Anarumo's defense, I think bringing him in immediately eases that transition by a big percentage. And you've got a need at linebacker if you're moving on from EJ Speed. So rarely do these names pop up where somebody's a trade candidate or a cut candidate that they make a ton of sense. But with how close Lou Anarumo and Jermaine Pratt were, and the Colts just getting Lou Anarumo, it seems kind of aligned at this point.
Yeah, we said we were going to stay under the hour mark. We'll go a little over it here. We got to put these here. Bruce. I'm going to say I think it's Bracel. So I have faith in him. I'm going to say 55%. Look, 55% is not the craziest amount of faith.
It's sad when you say you have faith in him and it's still barely over 50%, right?
Still barely, yeah. So then we got a couple other comments we have to highlight. I'll keep saying it. Richardson will probably be like Tannehill where he fails at his first team, but then is decent in another locker room. I'm just going to be honest with you, Patrick. That would be a major kick in the gut if that happened because the Colts put so much faith in Richardson's abilities. And if a new coach can do it, that's going to be terrible. That's going to be a bad look.
You've seen that with quarterbacks in the past, though, like these guys that get drafted early and then you just move on to a different team. Those expectations reset and you're kind of allowed to do your own thing. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Tannehill, like you're talking about, where all that weight of being the franchise guy and all these people's jobs are on the line if you don't do or don't perform. I think that's definitely going against Richardson. That's got to be hard for anybody to handle. This is the fate of a billion-dollar organization resting on your shoulders at 22, 23 years old. I can't imagine that.
No.
Yeah, you see people like that go somewhere else where that weight's completely lifted and they can just play football again. I don't want that to be the case with Anthony Richardson. I want obviously him to prove that he can shoulder a billion-dollar organization on his back. But yeah, I hope for the best for him regardless.
Yeah, and the last one here is actually really great. And I'll just throw it here. Uh, NFL Nerd says Rich is playing the Price is Right with AR5 chances. So Rich says 49.9% chance right now. Consistency will be the key. The clutch game is there, though. Look, you saw it against the Patriots. You saw it against the Jets. Richardson can go out there and win you a game when it counts. He really
Yep.
can. And so that's something that you cannot put a price on. But I will say that when you can't hit open throws, I mean, say what you want about the team, say what you want about drops, this and that. Richardson looked like absolute crap at times when he was throwing that football. So we'll have to see what happens. He's doing a lot of offseason work. But this last one, Aaron Rodgers won't be a Jet. And so many analysts, not us, we haven't predicted he's going to the Colts. Aaron Rodgers, potential Colts QB. Why? I don't know why anybody's talking about this. I think if you brought him to the Colts, you're talking about essentially benching Anthony Richardson. Do you think this makes any sense, or do you think it's an absolute ridiculous pipe dream for anybody that does want it to happen?
I'll just quote our friend Jake Arthur. Nah, dog.
Absolutely perfect. Well, that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, look, at the end of the day, these Colts cornerstones are going to be massive. These are massive, massive, massive players for the future of this team. And if they don't work out, it's not the end of the world. But that last one, Anthony Richardson, that is without question going to be the biggest one. But yes, please go like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook. Follow Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. On X, we are at Colts on SI. Subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle on YouTube. Do not forget to click that bell to turn on the notifications. If you want to listen to us, well, guess what? We're everywhere. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Play. We're everywhere. And don't forget to throw some chats into the comments. But yeah, so what we will be doing is we will be continuously bringing you Colts content starting next Monday. And yes, we are back on our normal schedule. Just had a couple of things come up. But next week, we're actually going to be talking about some bold predictions that we have for the offseason, bold predictions that we might have for the regular season. We're not going to leave anything off the table here because this is a franchise that is in flux. This is a franchise that's at a crossroads. And if they don't succeed, ladies and gentlemen, you might see this thing blown up to the studs. Okay, I'm talking from the front office down to the coaches, down to the players, and it's all hinging on a young man named Anthony Richardson wearing a number 5 jersey. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in with us and sticking around with us for over an hour. And until then, have a wonderful Thursday, a wonderful Friday, a great weekend, and we will be talking Colts football with all of you on Monday night. See ya.